Welcome to Buns, Burgers, and Big Ideas, the go-to podcast for aspiring and seasoned leaders in the quick service restaurant industry. Each week, we serve up actionable insights and proven strategies to help you lead smarter, build stronger teams, and elevate operations. Whether you're taking your first steps into leadership or refining your expertise, we're here to fuel your growth and spark big ideas. Let's dig in.
Hey, welcome to Buns, Burgers, and Big Ideas. I'm Eric Jaworski with my co-host Riley Shine.
How's it going?
It's another beautiful, glorious day.
Yeah. Positivity in the air.
Just everywhere. Everywhere.
More passion.
Right?
More passion.
Well, spring is almost here.
It
right?
is.
So, like, the weather's going to start breaking anytime.
Actually, it's only the end of January.
I know, but, like, it's going to, right? Like, that's where the positivity comes in, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know where you live, or where your weather is at, but...
we're in the Midwest. It's gross.
Yeah. It can get super terrible and super cold.
We got to remain positive.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 little dogs, right? So, like, whenever it's cold outside, like, they do not want to go out there. They're 3 dachshunds if you're, you're wiener dog lovers, right? But, yeah, they're just terrible.
They don't like the outside?
No, they absolutely despise it.
So I have a golden doodle, and I don't think he hates it, but like he'll go out there. Like when he was a puppy, he loved it.
Sure.
He'd go out there and just hang out for a little bit and just run around and kick the snow. Yeah. And his fur is like curly, so like the snow would get knotted, and it was a pain for us.
Sure, because then he's melting all over the house, too,
yes,
right? The
melting everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, it's the darndest thing. We only have one dog that likes it, and Charlie, and he's white, so he gets lost in the snow all the time. So it's just...
Where's Charlie?
We just can't win. Yeah, we can't win with the weather here. But
cool. So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about leading yourself. And it's super fun, right? Like kind of, building off of our mental acuity, right, from the last episode, like we have to know ourselves to lead ourselves. And sometimes we don't know who we really are or who we want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were putting this together, we kind of started with the whole, like, how do we build self-awareness? And the questions really started with, do we know what triggers us first? Like, do we have that awareness?
Right.
And how do we manage those triggers?
Yeah. And I think taking that, reversing, the looking glass, so to speak, and trying to look inside, it's hard to do. But finding those triggers and making sure that you understand what those are and being able to get your mind ready for that.
Yeah.
If you know that... okay, for example, my trigger is snow. I don't like snow. I don't really care for snow. But so the other day it snowed and it wasn't in the forecast. I woke up white.
Yeah.
I was immediately triggered.
Well, the weatherman is the only one that doesn't have to be right?
Yeah. Only right, was it once a year or something?
Yeah.
I don't know. So, but knowing my triggers and I'm grateful I'm a positive person. So like, I was like, darn it, it snowed. And then I just went about my day and was happy. But for other things, right, it's a little harder to recognize those triggers.
Yeah, it can be. And I think just kind of keeping a log, right, or assessing what your strengths and weaknesses are can also help you identify what those triggers are, right? I think sometimes you just can wake up angry, right? You got to figure out why and how to snap out of it. But like the hardest part can be even knowing your trigger and knowing how to get out of it might be just as tough. But when you're assessing your skills, I think we underestimate sometimes what our strengths and our weaknesses are. Like we don't always put ourselves, like you might talk to me and say, hey, what are you good at? And you might list 15 different things, and I didn't even know any of those things. So I think finding a way to really think about what those strengths are that you possess can only help you mentally, help build your confidence, and it can really help you be a better leader.
Well, and you mentioned the strengths and weaknesses, right? I think I always think of the saying, like, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, like, build off your strengths. Like, don't, if you're bad at doing the laundry, I don't know, don't do the laundry.
My wife says I am, so that's fine.
Yeah. So, that's a funny example. But that just came to my head. Like, if you're really good at doing the dishes, then do the dishes.
Sure.
Like find those things that you're really good at doing, and find and surround yourself with people who are good at what you don't do. Yeah. Essentially.
No, you're right. You're right. 'Cause a lot of the times we want to focus on our weaknesses, right? Like we were kind of told and growing up, like, hey, you have to improve your weakness. You're bad at this. Like, if I'm bad at science, like I personally was never good at science, right? Science. But like, if I don't enjoy it, and I'm bad at it. Like, why am I going to keep wanting, like,
It's a bad waste of your time. Or it's a poor waste of your time.
because now I'm not having fun.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Like,
that's what matters.
I just, like, it doesn't, like, get me going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if I have a strength and I'm passionate about, say, like, math, like, we'll just talk subjects, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy math, right? So if I want to learn more about that, I'm going to want to put the energy in, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to improve my strengths. Like, it's really easy to go from, say 1 to 10. Like, if my math skills are a 7, I can go to a 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if my leadership skills are a 7, I can go to a 9. But if I'm working at a 2, I'm
Nine
never
seems
going to get to
impossible.
9. You're
Yeah.
never going to get
Yeah.
there. Like,
Yeah.
no matter how much you may try, like, okay, maybe after a decade or 2 or whatever, but, like,
Yeah.
imagine how much energy that's going to take.
And it's going to take away from a lot of other things.
Yeah.
It's going to take, that could take away from your life, from
Mm-hmm.
your, the time, your team, your family, your time, whatever that looks like,
Mm-hmm.
that could take away from that.
Well, think about it even like from a sports standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not the quarterback. I'm not going to go play quarterback, right? Like, the wide receiver might go play quarterback for a play, but they're not going to go in there for 50 plays and play. Like, you're not going to go from quarterback to offensive line. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just want to stay in your lane. And I think we aren't always taught that, right? Like, once again, we're taught to work on our weaknesses, but that energy can just be better spent in other places.
Build your
and,
strengths.
And I liked what you said. Like, I want to go back to, you said, like, how do you build your team around those skills? So, like, tell me more about that.
Building my team around my strengths.
Well, around, like, your weaknesses, right?
Oh,
you
okay.
said, if I've got a weakness in this area, like, how do you compensate for
Gotcha.
that then?
Well, and I think that's when you're looking for the people who excel in those areas. In the restaurant industry, say you have somebody who's really good at, like, we're going back to math, but really good with numbers. Maybe they would be a good candidate to kind of help you with food over base or food costs, things like that, because they're more apt in that realm where I might be a 2 at numbers. So now I'm using people to drive my business and to manage my business instead of doing it all myself.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was what you're looking for.
No, absolutely. It's funny you bring up like food costs, because food costs was fine. Like, the numbers were always fine, but, like, I was really bad at kind of diagnosing the issues and where the concerns were. But I never wanted to go to my boss and tell them that, right? And I've had other people come to me in the past, other general managers come to me like, dude, like, don't fire me, but, like, I don't understand food costs. Like, it's cool.
Yeah,
like,
it's okay.
I think just sometimes we want to hide our weaknesses, right? Instead of, and I like what you said, like, find others that can do it. Like, you don't need to hide your weaknesses, right? Like, just me knowing and me, overseeing the organization that I get the privilege of supporting, like, I'd rather know your weaknesses and be able to help you compensate for those. Like, so I think don't brush those under the rug too,
Yeah,
right? Like,
embrace them.
Yeah, be okay with being okay or not good. Like, you don't have to be good at everything. Like, that's not the expectation.
What is there's another saying there, jack of all trades is a master of none, or something like that.
Yep.
And I think there's some truth to that, because sometimes I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, or whatever that the other saying. I'm just full of sayings today.
Yeah, right. Like,
but I know enough to be dangerous, and a master or a jack of all trades is a master of none. But that's true. If I know a little about everything, or if I have base knowledge of a lot of different things, I'm not building my strengths in any of them. So I'm not an A+ at any of those things.
Yeah.
So find your strengths and build off of those, and make those your number one skills.
and a good leader is okay with you having weaknesses, because we have weaknesses. I have weaknesses, right? Like, I am bad with technology. Like, the videos
really is. Sorry, I'm supposed to not agree with you, but
you can agree with me, right? Like, that's But what's funny is like seeking feedback then, right? Like, how do I know I'm bad? Because everyone tells me I'm bad, right? And I'm okay with being bad at these things.
Yeah.
I'm okay with our team knowing what I'm not good at, right? Like, if I'm not good at these things, like, I want you to know that, because I need you. Like, I need you to support me with those things, right? So, yes, putting the podcast together, yes, setting up this room, like, I couldn't do this, right? But I'm okay with that. And I think from seeking feedback, we don't always seek the feedback, right? At least not in a way to where we want the real stuff.
well, and not in the way to where you're going to get anything out of it. Like you're not looking for let's face it, a lot of times we're looking for the feedback where it's like pat on the back.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Like, good job.
Yeah.
Like, that's the feedback that we want.
I want to hear that, yeah.
We don't want to hear the feedback where it's like, oh, hey, and not about weaknesses, but hey, sometimes you behave this way, or sometimes you you rush me into an answer, or da 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 da. So that feedback people don't want to hear. So how do we as leaders who need that feedback to become better leaders prepare our mindset for that and get ourselves in that realm?
I think we just have to flip the script a little bit. Like we're very, well, most of us, like leaders will give feedback, right? Like you'll give your team feedback, but the best of leaders start with getting feedback for themselves so that they can take time to have more self-awareness, right? And when I really started my journey, I asked for a lot of the 360 evaluations, and I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I go like, well, what can I improve on? Or like I didn't even ask people. Like I just assume like I'm cool, I'm good, I know everything. Like I don't need your feedback, right? And I think we have people like that still in our restaurants. Like, have you ever gone and looked at the shift sheet and like when you look at the shift sheet, like, okay, well, I'm working, I want to know who's running the shift, right? Like, and be like, oh, I'm probably going to call off that day, right? And the other manager's like, oh, but we make excuses for people, or we look at that and say, well, I don't want to work with that person.
Why not tell them?
But we
they don't know, or do they know that you don't want to work with them, and why?
And it's scary, right? Like it's scary for us to, because we were always taught, like, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. But if you have the right intent, right? I think there's the difference, right? Like, if you're going to provide feedback or you're going to ask for feedback, do you have the right intent around that? Like, I want your feedback because I'm going to take that and I'm going to have the intention of making myself better with that, right? So if you're going to point out maybe some of my flaws or my weaknesses, or if you're going to share things that maybe you didn't like about what I did.
Yeah, hurt my feelings.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
But I want that.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you share that with me, that's going to build a better relationship. And when we talk people, like it's all about building relationships, right? Like you're going to work with me, for me, and harder if we have some sort of rapport. And if I'm okay with getting your feedback, what's going to happen at that point is you're going to be okay with me giving you feedback. And you're going to take that a little bit differently because you know my intention is to just make you better. Do your employees and do your team members know that you have the intention behind wanting to make them better? Or are you just that person who likes to consistently put people down without the right intention?
Yeah. It's a really good point. You mentioned changing in relationships and the effect that has on like your relationship with that person. Tell me more about kind of what people can expect if they seek feedback from their employees or from their team. What other things can they see?
I'm going to tell you first, really, like I failed a lot of relationships in the past, right? Like I said, I was driven though. Like it just didn't matter. Like if you're not producing, if you're in my way, like I don't want you, right? So I didn't always take relationships as seriously as I could have, and I failed a lot of people. Like I had to learn that, and through my journey of trying to, I guess, just grow my own leadership skills, I've realized that I have failed a lot of people. But I've kind of dedicated myself to like not letting that happen in the future.
You learned.
Yeah. I had to learn because our people, like I was letting people down and I didn't realize that at first. And by learning more about that, like I got that personal feedback. Like I learned to lead myself by learning about myself where, hey, I wasn't always doing the right thing. I wasn't always well-intentioned, right? Yeah. But I think if you're going to ask for feedback, right, like you have to do something with that. Otherwise, that relationship will never grow. Like so, to your point, the relationship will grow when you actually do something about what they're saying, right? So if they say, hey, like you have resting face, right? Like if all of a sudden like they go to you and say, hey, dude, like I love you, but like your demeanor, like when you talk to me, like you look very grumpy like all the time, right? So now how do I maybe change that and try to smile a little bit more, right? Or how do I have a little bit more of a positive, attitude or hold myself more in a positive way? But if I don't do anything about that, you're never going to give me feedback again. Like you as the employee will never want to share anything with me because like you didn't do anything with me.
You didn't change your behaviors or you didn't change that thing. And so now, I'm not going to, or even worse, I'm not going to get results. I'm just, I'm just here.
Like you constantly yell. Every time you look at this, you're constantly yelling. And I think that even goes down to results, right? Like when I'm looking at results, I have to be in the right headspace. Yeah. Because let's say that it was a day, let's say it was snowing, right? Like it's snowing. I already know that labor is going to be bad, right? Like the next day I'm looking at across the board, like labor's probably going to be a little higher than where we should have been or where we wanted to be, but I have to take into account some things, right? And if I go in there and say we are 3% above labor, right? Like I'm going to send out that nasty text and be like, why were we over labor? And what does that do to your mood?
No, it kills it.
It kills it right then and there.
It's already snowing and now my boss is yelling at me.
Yeah. So like what good is that going to do at that point? Like let's have the conversation as needed, but let me be in a better headspace around it, right? I remember this was years ago and we had a bad labor day, right? And there were some things and metrics, right, that I wasn't happy with, and it was like Sunday afternoon and I'm sitting here and I'm getting angrier and angrier as I read this. Just like you just live in it, right?
Yeah.
Like I was not in the mindset. And the silliest thing, I'm sitting here and then, they're punching back and I'm punching back and like it's all of a sudden just like angry text after angry text and no one's winning, right? Like, and that's what I think we need to understand is like when we're in that headspace, like we already know that the results were, like most of our people already know they shit the pot.
And,
right?
it already happened.
Yeah. It's done.
It's done.
So instead of just going into that and being angry, like take a minute, right? Like now, I don't know, it doesn't have me as much anymore, but like when I first started being aware of my trigger, right? So to go back with the trigger thing, like when I first started looking at results and I would be angry about a result and I would start texting it and I read it now. Like I'd have to read it and be like, okay, take that breath, right? Slow down before you hit send. Can this be interpreted any negative way? Right? Or in any way where, hey, it's maybe not as fun.
The tone or
because I'm going to tell you too, from a communication side, people read into text, right? Like if it's all capital, like I have somebody that just texts in caps, right? Like they don't mean anything by it. They just text in caps, right?
I'm sure we could do another episode about that. That sounds good.
Right?
Tone and messaging.
Yeah. Exclamation points or whatever. Like you show a little angry face now with all the emotions that we can throw in there. But like when that text, like just erase it. Be done with, like, do not send. Like you got it out there, pretend you send and erase and move on, right? Like take a little break.
Yeah.
And I think that's helped me knowing my triggers, being more self-aware, understanding what does kind of raise the temperature, right? So to speak. Like just stop.
Yeah.
I had to stop myself. And that's where the relationships start building.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned deleting the message, right? And moving on. But I think there still needs to be that conversation, and you alluded to that, right? But the key here is that you take a solid minute before you have that conversation. So maybe it's even the next day. Hey, team, we missed the mark on labor the other day. Here's some whatever best bets or whatever XYZ.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it? What are we going to learn from 2 days ago mistake?
And that's exactly it. Like, but and before you even go to the team, like it is that self. Like, what could I, have a leader, have done better? Like, could I have set better expectations? Right? Yeah. Take the anger, right, or whatever that like let's say passion. Right? Let's use passion instead of anger, right? Because we're passionate about our results.
Yeah.
So let's take that passion and look at ourselves and say, okay, could we have done anything different? Did I know about the weather 4 days ago, right? Could I have started pre-cutting? Could I have planned that a little bit differently? Could I have had people leave a little bit early? Or could I have had these conversations? Could I have set the tone a little bit differently that day? And if I didn't, why am I blaming them, right? Like, or did I give them the ability to make those decisions without me? Or did they, like...
Yeah, autonomy,
Yeah, we have to coach and we have to own, and the relationships, honestly, like... Once I started looking at the positive stuff, once I got out of that mindset of like shooting off those angry messages, or even having the understanding like, hey, if you interpret my message as I'm angry, call me. Like I had to have that conversation.
I remember you did that once with me.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I remember that. And when you called me, I was like, okay, cool. Like it wasn't. I mean, part of it was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, right. Deny.
Yeah. But I was like, no, this will be good. We can both. Then it's clear our tone and we resolve the issue. Lickety split. It was fine. So yeah, absolutely. That tone matters.
I want to give an example. It's funny you mentioned that I did that to you once. This one pops into my head right away. We had one of our directors give a meeting, and it was it was a solid meeting, right? And I had just read this book, How to Have a Better Meeting, and I took the book and I gave it to him after the meeting, and I said, "Hey, read this," right? But like, guess what my intention was?
To make them have even better meetings.
Be like, dude, you had an awesome meeting. I just read this. Like, you're going to really enjoy this book. But guess what happened?
He thought you
I know he thought
crappy meeting.
Yeah, he thought it was a really bad meeting.
Hey, that was a really bad meeting. Read this book on having
Yeah.
good meeting. Yeah.
And
yeah.
it was funny because like he messaged me like, oh, like just upset. Like I don't even remember what the text message said per se, but I tried calling and they declined my call, and I tried calling again, declined my call, and I said, dude, like give me a call, man. Like I know you're upset, right? Like we have to have that emotional self-awareness too,
Yeah.
but like just be careful like what
Yeah.
you do and how you say it, and having conversations around
Absolutely.
that, because I had the best of intentions, but sometimes
didn't
we
really-
can be misinterpreted.
Yeah, misinterpreted. That's a
Yeah.
good one. And and if they don't know that intention, so at that point you obviously cleared it up. But if you were intending it, honestly, just say what you intend to. I know that's what we do a lot with some of those hard conversations that we have.
Yep.
Hey, my intention is this. It sounds weird. It sounds cheesy, but hey. Before we start this conversation, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. But I just want you to let you know my intention is to XYZ, to make you a better leader, to
Yep.
make us a better team, to make whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that intention goes a long way.
You're absolutely right about the intention.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, though, I found that you can have the best of intentions, but if you're not consistent with that,
Yeah.
that becomes an even bigger issue. So if one day or 1 week I'm happy-go-lucky and I'm having fun and I have the best of intentions, and the next day I come in and I start yelling about a certain result, right? Like, why isn't this tile clean, right? Like for 3 months it's been dirty, right? Well, like you didn't say anything. Like all of a sudden now you're not consistent. You're
Yeah.
not being fair. You're not being honest.
What boss am I getting today, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, see, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because if our team have to guess, right? Like, well, what side of the bed did they wake
Yeah.
up on today?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have to have as big of a positive can-do attitude. We had this speaker years ago from Disney who they said, like, when you're in Disney, you're always on stage. And I think as a leader, we have to, like, we are always on stage, right? People are always watching us. They're watching for what we're doing. They're watching for our consistency. They're watching for everything that we're going to be talking about for the next however many years that we do this
Yeah.
podcast. And I'm talking like maybe decades,
Yeah.
right? Like however long we do this, like we have to know that we have the best of intentions for our team and that we can consistently contribute to that, right? Like, once again, if I come in one day angry, like, how is that going to make you feel?
Like what's up with him? Like, I mean, honestly, I'd probably feel more concerned. Like if you're talking wishy-washy, like back and forth every other day, every other week,
Yeah.
then I'm just gonna be like,
That's who they are.
that's just who they are.
Yeah.
But if it's okay, he's been really cool and nice and whatever, fun-go-lucky, like you said, and now all of a sudden he's like acting like this, something must be wrong. Like
Yeah.
something's got to be going on. Like, is he
Yeah.
okay? Like, I'm more on the other side. Like, is he okay?
Yeah.
Type deal.
And that's a genuine point,
Yeah.
right? Because if you are, I like what you said, like the wishy-washy stuff. If you don't know what kind of leader you're going to get, like you're not going to get results, not
Yeah.
consistently. People will fear you, right? Like that's now we're talking like the levels of leadership, right? Like the 5 levels of leadership. Are they like level 1 is they're working for you because they have to. And at that point, if you're a wishy-washy leader, I'm working for you because I have to, because I need the paycheck,
Yeah.
right? But like to get to level 2 stuff, I'm working for you because I want to, is because now you're consistent. And I don't know if I think you would do that for me, right? Because I feel like I'm pretty consistent. Maybe we can have
Yeah.
more feedback later, right? but yeah, I would agree with you too. Like you're very consistent. You're very Riley, right?
Yeah.
And if Riley's off, I'm gonna know that you're off. And now it's that one stepping stone. Hey Riley, dude, like, do you want
Are
to
you
talk?
okay? Yeah.
Like, are you cool?
Well, and I was going to ask you this too a second ago, is everybody has those days, right? The bad days where you truly do wake up on the wrong side of the bed
Yeah.
or it snowed. So I guess what is your advice to those leaders who maybe have that day? Like what should they, or maybe it's a family emergency or maybe it's something serious like that. Like what would you what would you tell them, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's where know your people, right? Like sometimes people just, hey, you like be okay with people like going home, right? It's like if
Yeah.
they have to, like, dude, like if you need to go home, like go home. You're going to build a much better relationship at that point.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't read into those. Like, no, I'm cool. I need to be here and maybe just put me in the kitchen where I don't have to work with customers, right? Like
Yeah.
find out what that balance is. Maybe they just want to do dishes or they want to go clean, right? Something or lobby or like maybe they just want that. Like talk to them,
Yeah.
right? Like how can we best support you in this moment?
But as a leader though.
But
So,
as a
like,
leader,
yeah.
that's much different.
Yeah.
Like you can't live in that. Like you can't can't live in your misery. Like, it's okay to have a bad moment in time, but I know what you said, like, we have a bad day, but like, I don't think you have to have a bad day. I think you can have a bad moment in time, but that doesn't have to contribute to a bad day.
Okay.
And the self-awareness is you knowing what's going to pull you out of that. Because what pulls me out of that is going to be much different than what pulls you out of that. For me, it might be just taking a deep breath, or, you know, maybe listening to a song, right? Maybe looking at some pictures of the kids and the dogs and the family. Like, what brings you that joy? And then taking a breath and not allowing the small things to really grind your gears, right? Because usually we get, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like the bad things are usually just really small things.
Yeah. At least they can be.
Yeah. Like maybe it was an upset customer, right? Maybe the crew person didn't show up when they said they would. Maybe you had that one or two calls because of the snow. Maybe you had, right, the truck order was delayed and now the maintenance person couldn't stay, so you're putting away your truck. Like, those things are going to happen.
For sure.
Just don't live in it. Like, do your best not to live in that bad moment.
Yeah. I mean, don't sweat the small stuff. Absolutely. And I think if you have a moment where maybe it's really hard to pull yourself out, the pictures, the songs don't work, then tell your team, just say, hey, guys, this, you know, back to the consistency part, the reason this all started was if you come in and you've been even keeled this whole time and now you're all of a sudden angry, it's like, hey, what's going on? Again, do the flip side with your team. Like, hey guys, my childhood dog just died. Like, it's been a day. Like, I just put me in kitchen, or as a leader, I guess that was my original question. Like, as a leader, do I just say, hey guys, I need the day and just tell them and be honest with them? Like, or is it more of a, like, I don't know. How would you?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember last week, or maybe it was the week before, Riley, but I literally just told you, right? Like, hey, what did I say?
I'm annoyed.
I'm annoyed today, right? Like, I did. I went to you and I said, Riley, like, whatever it is, I'm just like, I'm annoyed right now. And what was really cool is you said, well, what are you annoyed with? And I said, I said something like, I don't know, I just need a moment, right? And like, just being okay with me saying that to you as a leader was like really helpful. And the fact that we have that relationship where you could support me and you were curious, like you were genuinely curious, and I didn't really need anything from you from that moment. I just needed you to know, right? That like,
and there's nothing wrong with
dude, I'm in
that.
it for a second. Like, just give me a moment. I'm in it.
We're all humans.
Yeah. So I just that self-awareness, like, there's probably a lot more to unpack here, and we can probably talk a lot more about that specifically. But the self-awareness and your triggers, I think, is going to be the main driver of this, and driving awareness. And even talking to your team after the fact. Like, you know, with my wife and I, like, I'm going to tell you, like, there are times where I'm mad at home and she's like, dude, right? Like, but I can't necessarily go to right there in that moment. But like, hey, the next day, you know, what do you think triggered me? Like, what are some things that I could do better? Like, what are some things that could pull me out of this? Like, just talking to the people that maybe were at that moment with you and say, hey, like, what did you see and how could I react better in the future? So asking for that feedback too on your triggers.
Great way to be self-aware.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't lead yourself
without knowing yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for finishing my sentence.
Go ahead and start over.
You can't lead yourself if you don't know yourself, you know? So I think that's really important, knowing and being curious all the time about how you're perceived. I know some people say like, oh, don't worry about what other people think of you. But I think when you're a leader, you have to a little bit, right? Like, to an extent, like you have to be looking to improve and looking for that feedback.
Yeah, you can't worry about maybe the small stuff that you can't control, but you definitely want to be curious as to how they feel, right? And take that feedback and do something with it when you can, right? And if you can't, tell them, right? Like, hey, I appreciate the feedback right now. Like, the goals are the goals, or right now this is what it is, and this is what we're working on, and I appreciate your idea, and you know, or your feedback, or whatever it might be, and just make them aware of that, and then let them know too. Like, if you see it again, go ahead and point it out to me. Like, let them know that it's okay to point those things out, because it takes time, right? And it takes time to change those things. And I think this is going to be really good for our audience. I think this is really good for us. I don't know if I've talked about leading yourself right for a while, so it's a good refresher.
It is, and you know, reference that vision board we talked about last week, and make sure you're keeping with those goals and you're committing to those things that you committed to. So, thanks for being here. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Buns, Burgers, and Big Ideas. We hope today's episode inspired fresh ideas for your leadership journey. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and keep learning with us as we continue to explore leadership in the QSR world. Until next time, take care and lead well.